Hello students, welcome to AriserTalent. As you know, we are studying very important chapter of NCERT, that is life process. In this chapter, we are talking about the transportation. In our previous lecture, we have talked about the transportation in human. Actually, we are studying the same topic, but now in this lecture, we are going to talk about the heart. In our previous lecture, we have already talked about the blood and blood vessels, which are the part of blood vascular system. Okay, let me mention it here that in the blood vascular system, I told you that it consists of blood vessels and heart. Blood vessels and heart. So we have already talked about the blood and blood vessels, their functions, their importance, and about the blood floating. Now we are going to talk about the very important part of the circulatory system, that is heart. So here you can see the structure of heart. Let me explain you. Generally, we all know that heart is muscular and actually it is hollow. Okay, if we talk about its size, and generally it is like if we will clench our fist, then it looks like a clenched fist. Okay, so here we can say that heart is a hollow and muscular bag-like structure which is covered by a double membrane, and this double membrane is known as pericardium. Okay, so let's talk about the heart. So generally we all know heart is, it is muscular, it is hollow and muscular organ. It is generally bag-like structure. Okay, and if we talk about its weight, generally in the males it is about 300 grams and in the females it is generally about the 250 grams. If we talk about its weight, we are just talking about I'm just giving you the general introduction here, then I'll explain you the structure. Weight, if we talk about the weight of the heart, then in the males it is about 300 grams in the male. Okay, and 250 grams in females. Okay, this is all about its weight. Now the thing is where it is situated. Actually, it is situated between the two lungs in the middle of the thoracic cavity. So if we talk about its situation, then it is situated between the lungs. It is situated between the lungs, means between the two lungs. We all have two lungs. It is situated between two lungs in the middle of thoracic cavity, in the middle of thoracic cavity. Okay, so it was all about its general introduction, that it is muscular in shape, it is hollow inside, and its weight is generally 300 grams in the male and 250 grams in the female, and generally it is situated between the two lungs in the middle of thoracic cavity. Now we are going to talk about its structure, how it looks like. Here we can say we can see that it looks like a bag. Okay, so we can say that the this heart is covered by double membrane. Okay, so if we talk about the structure, so we can say that it is double membrane. Okay, it has double membrane. It has double membrane outing, double membrane outer covering, which is known as pericardium. Okay, which is known as pericardium. So here we can see this outer covering means the heart which is covered by double layered membrane. It's known as pericardium. Okay, as I told you, it is double membrane. Let me explain you. It is double membrane. Okay, this is the outer membrane, it is the inner membrane. Okay, so between these two layers a fluid is filled which is known as pericardium fluid. Okay, let me mention, between these two layers or two membranes, a cavity is formed which is known as pericardium cavity, and it is filled with the pericardium fluid. So we can say between these two membranes a cavity is filled with a fluid which is known as pericardium fluid, filled with a fluid known as pericardium fluid. Okay, so here this cavity is filled with the fluid and it's known as pericardium fluid. So do you know what is the function of this pericardium fluid? Actually this pericardium fluid protects the heart from the injuries and jerks. So this is important. Make a note that this pericardium fluid, this pericardial fluid protects the heart from the jerk and injuries, Okay, so we can say that the outer covering of the heart is covered by the, or it is made by the two membranes, or we can say heart is covered by double membrane layer that is known as pericardium, and between these two layers a fluid is filled which is known as pericardial fluid. Okay, now if we talk about internal structure, then this heart is divided into two halves by a septum. Here we can see, okay, so we can say that the heart is divided into two parts by a septa. Okay, so this part is right part and this part is left part. Let me mention, heart is divided into two halves, or we can say heart is divided by a septa into two halves, right and left. Okay, so here we can see that heart is divided into two halves by a septa, right part and the left part. Again, these two parts means two parts are again divided into two chambers. If we talk about the particular right part, then again this right part is divided into two chamber by a septa. Same happens with the left part also, that this each half, we can say each half of the heart is divided again into two chambers. The smaller one is the right. If we talk about the right part, then the smaller one will be the right auricle or atrium, and then it will be the right ventricle. Same with the left part, it will be known as right auricle, right atrium, or it will be known as left atrium or auricle, and it will be known as left ventricle. Okay, so let me mention, right atrium or auricle and left ventricle, right ventricle and this part will be the left atrium or auricle and left ventricle. Okay, this is the smaller part, means the upper part is smaller one and the lower part is larger one. Next, so here we can mention that the each half is further divided into two chambers. Let me mention, each half part of the heart has two chambers, that is upper smaller atrium or auricle and lower larger ventricle. Okay, this is all about the internal structure of the heart. That heart is generally divided into the two halves by a septa, and each half has two chambers which are known as atrium and ventricle. The upper one is smaller and the lower chamber is larger. Fine. So next point here is about the blood vessels and the vena cava. Okay, so here we can see that right part, if we talk about the particular right part or right atrium, then it has two types of vena cava. These are superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. If we talk about the right part and right atrium, then it has two types of vena cava, superior and inferior. Superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. So what are the functions of these superior vena cava and inferior vena cava? Here we can see in the diagram which we have already shown you here. This superior vena cava brings deoxygenated blood from the upper part of the body, and this inferior vena cava brings the deoxygenated blood to the heart from the lower part of the body. Let me mention, superior vena cava, it brings deoxygenated blood from the upper body to the heart, and inferior vena cava, it brings deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body to the heart. Okay, it brings deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body to the heart. Okay, so here you can understand the function of these vena cava which are present in the right part. then superior vena cava brings deoxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood means the blood which have given its oxygen to the tissues. Okay, so now it is deoxygenated. So this superior vena cava brings deoxygenated blood to the heart, and inferior vena cava brings deoxygenated blood from the lower part to the heart. Okay, now here we can see a pulmonary trunk here. So we can see this pulmonary trunk arises from the right ventricle and then further divides into the left and right pulmonary artery. Okay, let me mention. Next is pulmonary arteries. So pulmonary arteries generally develop from the pulmonary trunk. Let me explain. Next point is pulmonary trunk arises from right ventricle and divides into right atrium and left atrium. Right atrium and left atrium. Okay, so this is all about the structure of heart. What is the structure of heart? Heart is a muscular, okay, it is a bag-like structure. It is muscular in shape. It is generally hollow, and it pumps the blood in the body. Okay, it contracts and pumps the blood into the body. Generally, if we talk about the weight, so it is 300 grams in the males and about 250 grams in the females. And if we talk about its location, generally it is situated between the two lungs in the middle of thoracic cavity. If we talk about its structure, then it is covered by double membrane layer which is known as pericardium. Between these two layers of pericardium, a fluid is filled which is known as pericardial fluid. This fluid protects the heart from the injuries and jerk and shocks. So this is the function of the pericardial fluid. Now if we will talk about the internal structure of the heart, then we can say that the heart is divided into two halves by a septa. Here we can see heart is divided into two parts by a septa. Okay, and then each half has again two chambers. The upper one is smaller, which is known as right atrium, and which is known as the atrium, and the lower one is larger and it's known as ventricle. So same happens as heart is divided into two halves. So we can say that now the heart has four chambers, because each half has two halves, then two chambers, then we can say both these two halves will carry the four chambers. This is the reason the human heart is known as four chambered. Clear? That heart is divided into two halves by the septa, and again each half has two chambers. This is the reason that complete heart, human heart, has four chambers which are known as right atrium, left atrium, right ventricle and left ventricle. Okay. Now we talk about if we talk about the right atrium, then it again has two vena cava. The function of vena cava is to bring deoxygenated blood. So superior vena cava brings the deoxygenated blood from the upper part of the body, and inferior vena cava brings the deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body. Now if we talk about pulmonary trunk, then we can see it arises from the right ventricle, and then further it divides into two parts which are known as right artery and the left pulmonary artery. Okay, so here we have discussed the structure of the heart. In our next lecture, we will talk about the function or mechanism of this heart. Till then, take care. Thank you.